Hey everybody, in this video we are talking about functions and the domain and range of a function. So you're going to be able, by the end of this video, you are going to be able to tell me if something is or is not a function, and if it is, you can tell me the domain and the range of that function. We're mostly going to be looking at tables of values and graphs for this video. Some vocabulary that you will need to know: relation, function, domain, and range. Okay, let's start with the word relation. A relation is two sets of data or information where one set it's one set of data that relates or maps to another. Okay, so an example of this would be, let's say we had people, and that was our list, our first set of data were all these people, and our second set was their home address. So that would be one set mapping to another. You could have people's birthday, maybe, so 16 years old, and so how old they are and their birthday. Maybe somewhere in there. Okay, so there's two examples of relations. You could also see these as just sets of numbers, and you may or may not know how they relate. So you could have maybe a table of values. So you have a list of X values. They could be and they could map to another set of numbers. Okay, you could be able to see a pattern there or maybe not. But anytime there is some kind of connection from one set to the next, that is a relation. Let's talk about functions. A function is a special relation where each number or item in the first set can only map to one number in the second set. Okay, and this can get a little bit confusing, so I want to look at plenty of examples. So let's start with just our table of values that we talked about. So I'm just going to list some random numbers here. No pattern to these at all. I don't know. -5, -2, 0, 3, and 7, 1, -5, 6. This would be an example of a function, because if we look at our first set, which is our x's, there each number only goes to one other number. Okay. Another example might look like this. Sometimes they list it in a diagram like this. They'll list all the values just in kind of a big blob there. And they'll have all the other values coming to this one. And then they'll say -3 goes to 2. This is where we get the word mapping. So -3 goes to 2. Maybe 2 goes to 2 as well. 1 goes to 1. And 0 goes to 1. Okay, this is a function. We have if I'm starting with -3, I only have one choice. It has to go to 2. So -3 is going to one value. +2 is actually going to the same value, and that's okay. It's still a function. The fact that this only has one place to go is what makes it a function. Okay, let me erase that, and let's look at some non-examples. Just so we're clear, these are not functions. Okay, so let's say I have that same setup, and this time we have 3 could go to 5, or it could go to 6. That choice makes this not a function, because a number in my first set went to 2 separate numbers in the second set. So this is not a function. Doesn't even matter what these go to. Because the 3 has 2 separate places it's going to, this is not a function. In a table, that might look something like this. Okay, so the problem here is the 2s. I have the same number going to 2 different numbers in the y. So these are not functions. Another example I kind of like to talk about is people and birthdays. So, because if you, I'll just explain. Let's say in our first set, we are talking about all the people that live in Kentucky, the whole state of Kentucky. And we're taking all those people, okay, and we're mapping to their birthday. Okay, if I picked a random person, we'll say Johnny, could he possibly have more than one birthday? No, he's only born one time. He's only going to have one birthday. So that would be an example of a function that checks out. Every person can only have one birthday. But what if I flip-flopped that? What if instead I said, over here I start with birthdays, and that's mapping to people in Kentucky. That's a whole different story, because let's say I picked the birthday May 1st, and that would map to everybody who had a birthday on May 1st, which I'm sure is definitely more than one people if you're talking about everybody in the state of Kentucky. So this would not be a function. Okay, so it has to be from the first set to the second set. You've got this choice. Okay, so that means it is not a function. Okay, let's talk about what this would look like in a set of graphs. Okay, and you'll see this on possibly on standardized tests and stuff. It's called the vertical line test. Okay, so the vertical line test kind of says if I have a graph, and let's say I had a bunch of points, kind of like you guys have been doing this, graphing points, just a ton of points there, and I graph them, and I know that graph is a curve and it does something like this. The first set, which is actually called the domain, one of your vocabulary words, and I'll talk more about that in just a second. Those are your x values down here. Okay, and your y values, which is your range, are these values here. So the x are my first set, and I want to make sure that for every point I only go to one separate point. If there were a mistake and this was not a function, then you could, I think I can do it this way, You could pass a vertical line through the graph, and as long as that vertical line touches this blue graph only once at a time, then you do have a function. Okay, let's look at a bad example. One that is not a function. Let's say you graphed a bunch of points and they made a circle on the graph. It's a terrible circle, but it'll still work. For this one, if I take my vertical line and I pass it through the graph, look, I'm touching the graph in two places at once. So this is not a function. Anytime that happens, if you can pass a vertical line through it and it touches the graph more than once at the same time, it is not a function. Okay, I hope that made sense. All right, let's talk about domain and range really quick and then we'll be done. Basically, the domain is that first set of data that we talked about. So it's your starting place. These are always X values. And we also always call them the independent variables. When we do word problems in another video, we will talk more about how to tell if something's the independent or the dependent variable. But for now, just know that the domain is independent. Okay, and then the range is that second set of data. These are always the Y's. They are the dependent variables. Okay, so if we were looking at a table of values and I asked you to list me the domain and range, you would say that the domain were the numbers 3, 2, 1, and the range is 5, 6, 7. Simple as that. Domain are always the X's, range is always the Y's. Okay, that's it for this video. Good luck on the practice, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.